I get a lot of questions about how I travel, how I plan my trips, and I thought this might be a good time to explain how I did one of my previous trips. I just released on this past Sunday a video about Quebec, and that was from all the way back in the summer in July. And this summer I took this like 36-day road trip, and I made dozens of videos, and I traveled about 7,000 miles. I drove about 7,000 miles, and I've been releasing them through the end of the summer and all fall, and now almost like into the winter, kind of like sporadically. So if you've noticed, I've had videos, like I have a video from Canada, I have a video from Kansas, and then a video in New York, and a video in Vermont, and then Ohio. So it's kind of all over the place. So I was going to explain how that trip went, but also give a little bit of an idea of how I do some traveling, and as I get a lot of those questions. And I'll let you know right up front how much money I spent. A lot of times people do these videos and it's like, wait till the end and you'll see how much I spent. I'm gonna tell you right now, get it out of the way. There's no kind of cliffhanger here. Excluding food, so I'm not counting food because it's such a variable for everybody, I spent $5,875, and I traveled for 36 days in a row. So, and I drove the whole way. So that gives you an idea of how much I spent. That's $163 a day. My goal was to kind of go $150 a day. I had some hotels that were pretty expensive. I'll show you here as we get going. And then, gas is what it is, and like I said, 7,000 miles of driving. So I spent just under $6,000, $160 a day, not too bad for as many miles as I was covering. And so it was a wonderful trip. Hopefully you've watched some of them. Hopefully you've enjoyed them. So anything I release at this point will not be from my summer, but I will be going on another trip over the winter, and it probably won't be like this long, but it may be a shorter version. And maybe if you want to go on a trip, there'd be some things that you can learn from it. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe this isn't any way that you would want to travel, but do get a lot of questions about it, so I thought I'd let you know. I don't plan way far in advance, but what I did for this trip was I knew when I was leaving and when I had to get back, because once I got back, I had to go to Oregon because I'm a coach at Wichita State, and I had to fly to Oregon literally the next day. So I knew kind of when I had to get back. And so that means when I was the farthest point away, which was way up in northern Quebec, Canada, I knew I needed to be hustling back, or at least more than halfway or halfway done. The whole point of my trip originally was to finish US 50. I had done US 50 to the West Coast from Kansas, and then last year I did Missouri. So I needed to go to Illinois and head east all the way to the East Coast. And so that was kind of the basic general start of what I was planning. And then I also kind of know how many miles I can travel and document per day. Somewhere in between 100 and 200 miles a day. Anything more than that is really tough for the way I do videos. So I kind of know those things and have a idea of how far I can travel each day. And then I also don't make a whole bunch of hotel reservations, because I'm just kind of getting ideas in case I want to stay for an extra day, take a rest day. I was also going to drive right through where I grew up, so visit some family for some time. So all that basically is to say I kind of plan stuff, and then also I kind of go fly by the seat of my pants many times. And I would say most hotels I booked the day before. Most of the hotels I booked the day before. Most of them I use booking.com, and it's just I like that app. It gives some discounts, especially if you use it as much as I do. And then sometimes I just call the hotels directly if maybe they're not on booking.com. They have most hotels, but not some of the like mom and pop type stuff. So anyways, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run really quick through my vacation, and starting with, instead of like a date, I'm just going to say day 1 to day 36, and kind of tell you where I went, what videos I filmed, and then where I stayed, how much that cost. And I'm going to do that because the videos I released were not in this order. I released videos in a randomly, no, it wasn't random order, but there was a strategy to it. But I released them in a different order than I did, so this will give you an idea of actually how they were filmed and what I filmed on each day. So started out in Wichita on day 1, and I filmed that day the Butler County Part 3. This was the final of a series I had been doing. It's right near where I live, so I filmed that, and I drove out to Nevada, Missouri, stayed in the America Best Value Inn for $99. Day 2, I drove up to Koolwink, Missouri, made that video, and then on over to Wildwood, Missouri, which is on Route 66, and stayed at the Wildwood Hotel. That was very nice for $115. Day 3, I started my US 50 venture, and that was in Illinois, and I made it over to Mount Vernon, and I stayed in a Super 8 there. There wasn't a lot of great options where I was traveling, and so I stayed at the Super 8, and I actually stayed there for 2 nights because I had a rest. I wanted to rest and do some editing, and so it was $102 per night, so $204 total for 2 nights. And that was day 3, rest day on day 4. Day 5, I finished the second half of Illinois and got almost to the end. I went to Lawrenceville, Illinois, and I stayed at the Gaslight Motel. Kind of made some jokes about that. That was only $65. It was, you know, get what you pay for. On day 6, I got up, and in Vincennes, right there, not far from the Illinois border, I went to the Indiana Military Museum, and also I went through about half of US 50 in Indiana, and stayed in Mitchell, Illinois at the Spring Mill Inn at the State Park, which I didn't realize was State Park until I got there. $108 at the Spring Mill Inn. Day 7, I finished up the second half of Indiana on US 50, and then I stayed with family because I was close to Cincinnati. Basically, I was in Cincinnati, crossing over the Indiana to Ohio border there, and so I stayed with family for the next 4 nights. So from night 7 through night 10. I filmed while I was there video with my interview with my buddy Kevin Lucas. We went to the Eastgate Mall with my family, and then on day 11 I started filming the first half of US 50 in Ohio. Made it out to Chillicothe, and then stayed at the Executive Inn for $74. Day 12, I finished up US 50 in Ohio, Part 2. And I also, in the middle of that day, went to Moonville, Ohio, to the ghost town, to the tunnels of Moonville, which was awesome. And then I made it over to Parkersburg, West Virginia, right on the border, and I stayed at the Sleep Inn and Suites for $93. Day 13, I started my US 50 trip through West Virginia, and also stopped in Pennsboro, West Virginia to visit some more tunnels. Stayed in a really cool motel called the Koolwink Motel in Romney, West Virginia, oldest town in West Virginia. That was $75. That was one I had to call because they are not on booking.com. Loved that hotel. Day 14, continued US 50 through West Virginia. Got pretty much to the end of that. I stayed in Bridgeport, West Virginia at the Microtel Inn and Suites. It was only $76, and I stayed for 2 nights, so I got a rest night there. That was pretty much my 3rd day of rest in 15 days. I also kind of had one with some family there in Ohio. So that was day 14, and day 15 was the rest day. Day 16, I went US 50 through Virginia, pretty much through the entire state. It was a shorter portion of US 50, and then I stayed in Arlington at the Clarion Inn for $123. And also I did a little stroll through Winchester, Virginia, on that same day, day 16. And at the end of the day, I hung out with one of my former athletes who works in Washington, D.C. Day 17, I toured the Crystal City Mall right there near D.C., and then I did US 50 through D.C. It was pretty much a GoPro video, and also went halfway through Maryland on US 50. So 3 different videos were filmed that day. And I ended up staying in St. Michael's, Maryland at the St. Michael's Inn for $96. Really cool little town, St. Michael's. Day 18, I finished US 50 and went out all the way to Ocean City, Maryland, stayed at the Thunderbird Beach Motel for $109. So if you notice, I said my trip was 36 days. US 50 there is day 18. So pretty much half of my days are up. So at that point, I knew I really had to kind of zoom through a lot of the rest of the vacation that I was wanting to do. So day 19, though, I actually took a rest day because I wanted to after that US 50 trip, I needed a day off. So I drove back to Salisbury, Maryland, which was not far from Ocean City, and I stayed at a Motel 6 for $145. That was the best I could find. It actually wasn't too bad, but it was $145 for Motel 6. Day 20, I did the small town downtown Delaware video, and I drove up to York, Pennsylvania, stayed at the Wingate Hotel for $129. Day 21, I visited Centralia, Pennsylvania, which was really awesome to visit that historic ghost town. And then also I went to Scranton, PA, where we did the little office video that my buddy Kurt put together, and then ended up in Binghamton, New York at the Comfort Inn for $121. Day 22, did New York Route 28 that actually ended up probably being the most popular video of my entire trip. Kind of amazing that was the one. But that was awesome. I finished that day. I drove all the way up through there to Montpelier, Vermont. I stayed at the inn at Montpelier for $76. It was a great hotel. Really nice hotel in historic Montpelier. Day 23, got up and explored the state capitol there in Montpelier, the smallest state capitol in the United States, and then visited the 4 smallest towns in Vermont. On my way up to Bangor, Maine, to stay there to Super 8 for $182. That was the best thing I could find way up there, $182 in Bangor, Maine. Day 24, got up and went over to Lubec, Maine, which was the easternmost town in the contiguous United States. And then I drove up to Holton, Maine, and I stayed at the Ivy's Motor Lodge. I stayed there 2 nights for $137 each night. I needed a rest at that point. So that was day 24, then day 25. Day 26, I drove on up to the top of Maine. That was Madawaska. And then did the video there about the northeasternmost town there. And then drove across the border into Canada, into New Brunswick, and then on into Quebec. Yeah, and stayed in the town of St. Antonin and at the Motel Express for $135. Day 27 was a really long day. I drove a long way more than 200 miles. But I drove all the way up to Chibougamau and Chibougamau, Quebec. I stayed at the Hotel Chibougamau for $125. And that's day 27. So now I start turning around and coming back south and west. I go through Quebec. I end up staying down in Val-d'Or, Quebec. I stayed at a hotel called the Motel Park for $83. And especially in places like that, having Booking.com with not being able to speak French language that everybody up there spoke, that was helpful. But $83, that was a pretty good hotel. Day 29, I drove across Ontario and ended up staying in Sudbury, Ontario at the Belmont Inn for $77. I was going to make a video on Ontario, and then there was so much construction on the roads. It kind of got frustrating. I have some film, but I ended up not using it. So there was going to be another Canadian video, but ended up not doing it. It wasn't going to be very good. So anyways, that was just a day of traveling and not filming anything of substance. Day 30, I cross into the Upper Peninsula, and I stay in Sault Ste. Marie in Michigan. On the Michigan side, there's a there's a same name of the city on the Ontario side. But I stayed there for a night, $89 there. And then drove across the Michigan Upper Peninsula. Most of the way, stayed in Iron Mountain, Michigan, and at the Motor Host Inn. $83. I stayed there 2 days and took a rest day on day 32. So it was day 31 and then rest day on day 32. Day 33, I did the small town downtown video about Wisconsin. We're getting almost to the end. And at the end of that, I drove over to Mora, Minnesota. I've got friends that live there. My friends Cole and Rachel from Working for the Wild. And I stayed there for 2 nights. That was fun. It was definitely a day off, and had some fun socializing in Mora, Minnesota. And that was day 32, then day 33. Day 34, I filmed Weird Minnesota, where I visited some odd places in Minnesota on my way down. I stayed in Sioux Falls, South Dakota that night at the American for $109. At that point, it was getting close to the end of my trip. So on day 35, I drove down to Kansas City. I went to Olathe, Kansas, and stayed at the Sleep Inn for $102. And I got ready for having my first ever YouTube live. So I didn't film anything that day on the way down, from South Dakota because I wanted to get ready for that video. I'd never done a YouTube live, so that's what happened. I was actually wanting to do some more videos in like North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, but just ran out of time and was not able to. Day 36, I drove to Wichita, Kansas, and I slept in my bed. So that was the 36 days. And day 37, I got up and I flew to Oregon, and I was out there for another week. So that was my summer trip, and that's all the videos that I made, and it was quite an adventure. I really enjoyed it. I was definitely tired by the end, I can tell you. I had done about 20 to 25 days in a row before, but 36 days was pretty tired, especially as much as I did from like day 26 to 36. That was from way up in Quebec all the way down to Wichita. It was a lot of driving, and but it was definitely worth it. I hope you enjoyed a lot of those videos. Out of those, all the ones that I mentioned, I hope there's something there that you liked, and it's fun to imagine in a month, 1 month or a little bit over a month, how much you can cover of North America and document. And then I hope to be able to do some more this holiday season, and then over the next summer, hopefully do some more in a different part of the United States and or maybe Canada. So anyways, thank you all very much for your support through all those summer vacation videos. And if you know anywhere you'd like me to visit in the future, feel free to put it in the comments. And till next time, I'll see you down the back road. A special thank you to all of our channel members, executive producers, and supporters, for which I would have not been able to do this trip without their support. Thank you very, very much. If you'd like to become a member, check out the description in the video. I also summarized this trip in the description for anyone wanting more details.